Some stories don't start with a bang. They start with a whisper you can't unhear, your own mother looking you dead in the eye and saying, "I always knew you'd fail." And then you prove her right in the most humiliating way by sleeping in the back seat of your car, brushing your teeth at a gas station, pretending you're just between places, while the cold keeps score. Tonight's story isn't here so we can enjoy someone getting what they deserve, and it's not here to hand out verdicts. If we can do anything, let's step into it with a little quiet, because sometimes the deepest wounds aren't the ones strangers give us. They're the ones that come with a family last name. I was 37, homeless and trying to survive one parking lot at a time when a cop ran my license for a simple violation and froze. "Sir," he said, voice suddenly careful, "there's a federal flag on your file from 1998. Homeland Security wants your location." When he showed me the reason, my hands started shaking. And that's where we begin. My name is Riven Calloway. And before I tell you what happened next, I just want to know you're here with me. Say hi in the comments or tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference when you're about to say the truth out loud. Thank you. And if you can please subscribe. Not for the algorithm, for me. Because this story is messy, painful, and real, and I'm going to share every part of it, even the parts I'm ashamed of, until it finally makes sense. Alright. Here's what my family did and what 1998 has to do with the life they tried to erase. I woke up to the sound of knuckles tapping glass. Not hard, just enough to raise the hair on my neck. My eyes opened to complete darkness, save for the pale smear of streetlights bleeding through fogged-up windows. The world outside was frozen. The windows were breathing, no, that was me. My own breath painted ghosts across the windshield. Instinctively, I tightened my fist around the car keys I kept wedged between my fingers as a makeshift weapon. Not that it would help. The last time I'd used them like that was for unlocking the glove compartment, not defending myself. But survival makes a man believe in symbols. Keys meant I still had some form of control, even in a car that wasn't going anywhere. I blinked, trying to get my bearings. The digital clock on the dash read 1:47 a.m. The back lot of the grocery store was empty except for my car and a couple of grocery carts left adrift. I sat upright from the back seat where I'd curled under a thin fleece blanket, limbs stiff and aching from sleeping on a slope. The plastic bin of dry food had tipped over during the night. Crackers and canned beans rolled near my feet. Then I heard it again, 3 solid taps. I sat up straighter. My breath fogged the glass and I rubbed at the window to see. A flashlight beam hit my eyes and made me flinch. I lowered the glass halfway. The man standing outside had a uniform badge and tired eyes. He didn't look hostile. Yet. "Evening, sir. I'm Officer Declan Pierce with Minneapolis PD. Got a call about a vehicle parked overnight. Mind showing me license and registration?" His voice was even, not unfriendly. My heart tried to convince me this was routine. Just another late-night knock. Another warning. Maybe a ticket. I'd gotten those before and lived to tell. I handed him my license and vehicle paperwork, trying to keep my tone light. "Sorry, officer. I didn't want to risk driving drowsy. Figured it was safer to nap here." He nodded once, then walked back to his cruiser. I watched through the side mirror, chewing the inside of my cheek while I waited for the scribble of a citation. That's when I noticed him pause. His hand hovered above the keyboard longer than usual. Then he leaned in, squinting at the screen. His shoulders shifted. He reached for the radio clipped to his chest. Something was off. He wasn't writing a ticket. He was waiting for something. I sat up fully now, anxiety replacing drowsiness. The cold didn't matter anymore. My blood felt like it was crawling backwards in my veins. Officer Pierce returned, but slower this time. His stance had changed. Professional but cautious. Like he wasn't sure what I was capable of. Like maybe I was no longer just a guy catching sleep in a beat-up Subaru. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle for a moment," he said. "Hands visible at all times, please." I stared at him. "What's going on? I just need you to cooperate. Step out and we'll talk." I obeyed cautiously, stepping into the freezing night air. My shoes scraped salt-stained asphalt. He gestured for me to sit on the curb. "I'm not under arrest, right?" I asked, trying to control the shake in my voice. "No, sir." "Not at this moment," he said. "But I do need to inform you. There's a federal flag on your record, from 1998. Homeland Security has requested immediate notification if your location is confirmed." The words didn't land at first. 1998. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. My body was present, but my mind was suddenly 14 again, shoved backward into memories I'd spent 2 decades trying to bury under ambition and false starts. I could hear my mother's voice like it was sitting in the back seat. "I always knew you'd fail." My whole life had been built on proving her wrong. And here I was in a parking lot with a federal warning that had apparently been asleep for 25 years. Until now. Then came the headlights. No sirens, no tires screeching. Just a black SUV gliding into the parking lot like it belonged there. Like it knew exactly where to stop. It didn't stall, didn't hesitate. Officer Pierce stiffened beside me, watching the vehicle. He didn't flinch when it parked. That's how I knew he'd been briefed. He was expecting them. I sat frozen breath, fogging the air, heart pounding. This wasn't a random audit. This wasn't some clerical error. It was a net, and I had just tripped the wire. 6 months earlier, I still had a door I could lock behind me. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy. But I had a 1-bedroom apartment in Loring Park, a decent view of downtown Minneapolis, and a job that gave me purpose. I was a project manager for a mid-sized interior construction firm. We built out office spaces, cafes, schools, nothing glamorous but solid work with solid people. My life was ordinary, and that made it mine. I woke up early, answered contractor calls, solved supply issues, fielded complaints from clients who changed their minds mid-renovation. I stayed late because I cared. I wanted to climb the ladder. Slowly. Steadily. It wasn't about money, it was about earning something I'd never had growing up: respect. Even then, I knew how fragile it all was. Every Sunday, I made the trek out to Edina. Mom liked to say we needed to keep the family fabric from fraying. What she meant was show up, shut up, and stay in your assigned role. Mine was the cautionary tale. Dinner was the same every week. Roast chicken, potatoes, a performance of domestic perfection. My sister Sloane would arrive with her Tesla, her silk scarves, and her husband Trent, the guy who talked like a podcast and smiled like a sales pitch. Mom practically glowed whenever they walked in. And then there was me, the foil, the guy who still rented, the guy who didn't take real risks, the guy who apparently didn't know how to marry into upward mobility. "You're doing well." For someone in construction, Mom once said, pouring wine without eye contact. I'd grown numb to it, but that didn't mean it stopped hurting. Then came the papers. It was a Thursday when I stopped by Mom's to have her sign a few documents related to some old inheritance taxes from Dad's side. Minor stuff, housekeeping. I'd handled most of it. Just needed her signature to close out the file. She barely skimmed them, sighed, signed. "You know," she said, capping the pen, "I always knew you'd fail. But I figured I'd let you try." I took the folder and left without a word. Because if I opened my mouth, I would have screamed. I remember going to the grocery store after that, picking up peanut butter and frozen meals, trying to shake off the usual post-Edina shame spiral. That's when my card got declined. The cashier tried again. Same result. I used a backup. That one failed too. I told her it must be the machine, but I knew better. Back in the car, I checked my bank app. Transactions I didn't recognize stared back at me. Luxury restaurants, boutique purchases, out-of-state shipping. Some of it weeks old. Panic set in. I called the bank. They confirmed multiple new credit cards had been opened in my name with linked addresses in Edina. The rep asked if I'd recently moved. I had not. I pulled a full credit report. The flags were everywhere: new accounts, hard inquiries, even a change of address form I hadn't authorized. One address came up over and over: a mailbox registered 2 blocks from where Sloane and Trent lived. I stopped breathing for a second. It couldn't be coincidence. Not with the timing. Not with the way Mom had rushed those signatures. Not with the fact that Sloane worked from home and Trent used to brag about knowing just enough about finance to be dangerous. And not with the way the paper trail started exactly 1 week after that visit to Mom's. I dug deeper. Some of the letters from the credit bureau had been switched to paperless without my consent. Others had mailing addresses updated to a forwarding location I didn't even recognize. All of it pointed to one thing: someone had rerouted my financial life. Not hacked, not some stranger in another country. Someone close. Someone who knew what to look for, what to forge, what I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I stared at the timeline on my laptop, breath shallow. 6 months ago, I had a stable life. Now I was holding a stack of fraudulent charges, a stolen identity, and the creeping suspicion that my own family had decided I was easier to erase than to help. And the worst part, I hadn't even seen the real damage yet. I pulled into Sloane's driveway in Edina like I was crashing through an invisible wall. The kind you build over decades, brick by brick, made of shame and silence. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but I wasn't leaving without answers. Their house looked like a showroom. Clean white siding, immaculately trimmed shrubs, the kind of perfection that demanded performance. It made me sick. I got out of the car, the printed credit reports gripped tight in one hand. I rang the doorbell harder than I needed to. No one answered at first. Then I saw movement through the frosted glass near the door, and a few seconds later the lock turned. Sloane opened the door, robe tied tight, face scrubbed clean of expression. Like she'd been expecting me. Or like she expected someone to interrupt her evening. "Riven," she said flatly. "It's late." "Yeah, it is," I said. "Where's Trent?" She blinked once, stepped aside without inviting me. I walked in anyway. Their kitchen glowed with sterile overhead lights, white quartz counters, chrome everything. Like no one actually lived here, just posed for magazines. I dropped the stack of papers on the island counter. "I'm gonna ask this once. Who opened these accounts under my name?" She glanced at them, didn't even reach for the papers. "Is this what you're spinning out about?" "Spinning out," I said. "Someone used my identity. My credit is shredded. I have debt collectors calling me. This isn't a mix-up, Sloane." She rolled her eyes and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "It was temporary. You always overreact." "You're not denying it," I said. "I'm saying it's not what you think." Trent had some things he needed to get started for the new business. It made sense to use your info just until what I drowned in debt, until I got evicted. That's when Trent walked in barefoot, sipping something from a tall glass like he'd just finished a Peloton ride. He looked between us, then smirked. "Hey man, didn't realize we were having a full-on intervention." "Cut the crap," I said. "You've been using my name to take out credit. You rerouted my mail. You changed notification emails. You opened 3 credit lines and left me holding the bag." Trent raised both palms. "We didn't steal anything. You weren't even using your credit. Look, we're building something here. Real estate consulting, whatever takes off. It's not personal. We figured you'd help the family." "Help," I said. "Help you commit fraud." Sloane's voice cut in calm and infuriating. "No one's defrauding anyone. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. You forged my signature. You altered my financial identity. You made me legally responsible for charges I didn't authorize. That's identity theft. I could be arrested." That was when I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the cops." "Don't," came a voice from the hallway. I turned and saw her. Marge Calloway. My mother. She stepped forward from the shadows of the staircase like she'd been waiting for her cue. Still dressed in pressed slacks and a cashmere sweater like she'd come straight from hosting a book club. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture, rigid and resolute, was loud enough. "You will not call the police on your family," she said. I stared at her. "You knew I knew you'd show up eventually," she replied. "That's not the same thing. I'm being drained dry and you're standing there acting like it's a misunderstanding." Marge's voice turned sharp. "You need to calm down." "No. No more calm. I've played the reasonable son for 37 years. I've swallowed every dig, every comparison, every Sunday dinner humiliation. I let you talk over me, walk through me, erase me. But this This is theft. She walked past me straight to Sloane's side. Like choosing sides wasn't even a decision. They're trying to build something, she said. They didn't mean harm. They've wrecked my life. Marge's eyes narrowed. If you go to the police, you will no longer be a part of this family. You will not show your face here. You will not contact us again. The words landed like a hammer. No deliberation. No hesitation. You're choosing them, I whispered. I'm choosing to preserve what's left of our name, she replied. The breath left my chest. I looked at Sloane, at Trent, both of them perfectly still like predators who knew the kill was clean. Jesus Christ, I said. You set this up. Trent looked at me with mild annoyance now, not even fear. Look, if you're so concerned about the accounts, you should check the digital enrollments. Everything was confirmed with the security questions. He smiled like that proved something. That's when my stomach dropped. I never shared my security questions, but Trent just referenced them. Specific phrasing I remembered choosing, meaning he'd had access to more than just my name and social. He had the kind of access that meant either hacking or help from someone with access to family records, estate paperwork, old files. I turned to Marge again. Her mouth was a tight line, her eyes darted just once before hardening again. They weren't sloppy. They were guided. You're trying to erase me, I said. No, she said coldly. We're moving on. You're the one who refuses to grow up. I left the house shaking. Not in anger, at least not just that. In grief. Because in that cold kitchen under those bright white lights, I finally understood I'd never been part of the family. I was just the decoy they used to build a perfect life around. The calls started the next morning. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers, all with the same tone, clipped, aggressive, indifferent. Mr. Calloway, this is a courtesy call regarding your past due account. You are now 67 days in arrears. Another one. We've sent multiple notices to your address. If this matter is not resolved immediately, it will be escalated to civil action. I didn't know these debts. I didn't sign these agreements. But they had my name, my address, my last four. I called the credit bureau again. They confirmed several new cards opened in the last 4 months. One of them had been maxed out and sent to collections, but I never received any statements, I argued. Our records show they were sent to the email associated with your account. I asked them to read it back. It wasn't mine. It was an email I'd never used, but one close enough in format it could have slipped past verification. Probably created to mirror mine, enough to reroute communication. A phantom version of me had existed long enough to rack up thousands in charges, and now the debt collectors were dragging the real me into the pit. I tried to explain, to dispute. They told me to file a police report, which would take time I no longer had. At work, things turned colder. I was called into HR with a warning. There's been concern, my supervisor said, about your financial reliability. I stared at him. What does that have to do with my job? You've had access to certain project budgets and payment authorizations. We're being cautious. Then they handed me a printed complaint, anonymous, full of buzzwords, unstable, emotionally reactive, struggling with personal debt and unable to maintain professionalism. It read like a script my mother would write, or a polished version of every Sunday dinner insult. It was subtle character assassination, and it was working. I was pulled from client-facing duties. My access to internal financial systems was revoked. They didn't fire me. Not yet. But they put me in a holding pattern, like they were waiting for me to collapse on my own. The building manager called next. We won't be renewing your lease, he said. Your credit review raised some concerns. I've never missed a payment. It's not just about that, he said. New management is raising standards. You're welcome to stay the final month. But after that, I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. I checked my savings. What was left of it? Most of it was frozen due to fraud investigations. The rest had been drained in chunks, late fees, overdrafts, collection holds. I tried to fight it, but every door I knocked on had already been closed. Then came the final blow. A clerk at the bank mentioned a lawsuit had already been filed. Civil court. I checked the docket online. Sure enough, a creditor had sued me for breach of contract. Filed 3 weeks ago. I never got the summons. Which meant one thing: someone had intercepted it or rerouted it. Again. I was about to default without even knowing I was being sued. I called Marge, my last reach for something that might pass for support. I just need a few days, I said. A couch, maybe. Just until I can fix the paperwork. Her answer came like glass breaking. You made this bed, Riven. I told you. You always find a way to fail. She hung up, and I stood in the lobby of the bank holding the phone like it still might ring again. That night I packed the rest of my things into my car. I drove until I found a parking lot far from downtown, dark enough not to be noticed. I laid the blanket across the back seat, plugged in a power bank that had maybe 10% left, ate some crackers, drank warm water. I stared up through the cracked sunroof and tried to remember the last time I'd felt safe. Everything was gone. Job, home, family, reputation, and somewhere buried inside a pile of fake emails and rerouted bills, someone was still making small charges under my name, just enough to keep the fraud active, just enough to stop me from climbing out. The car was all I had left, and the city was already turning cold. The third night I slept in my car, I realized there were rules I hadn't known about, rules of the street. Not the ones written in books or taught in safety briefings, but the kind you learn by breathing the same air as men with nowhere else to go. Eli Mercado was the one who taught me that. He knocked twice on my window around 2:30 a.m. I jolted upright, clutching my keys like a weapon. He raised both hands. No threat, just warning. Don't park here 3 nights in a row, he said. They'll notice. I moved the car before sunrise. Days blurred. I rotated between a quiet alley near Midway, a backlot behind a boarded-up bowling alley, and the edge of a commuter lot where cameras didn't work half the time. I memorized which gas stations let you wash up without buying anything, which McDonald's had good Wi-Fi, which public libraries opened earliest. The mirror in the gas station bathroom was cracked across the center. I wiped my face with a damp paper towel, stared at myself in pieces. Hair unwashed, skin dry, eyes ringed in red. I didn't look like someone who used to draft building contracts or review floor plan logistics. I looked like someone whose name came with a warning. Inside the McDonald's, I nursed a small coffee for hours. I kept my laptop open, trying to look like I was remote working. 2 kids nearby whispered while pointing at my bags. I caught one word, homeless, and they didn't even try to lower their voices. I didn't react, just kept typing. But their words rang in my skull for hours afterward. Tasha Nguyen was the caseworker who actually looked at me when I talked. She worked at a non-profit shelter in St. Paul. It took 3 tries and 2 nights freezing in my car before I met her. She didn't flinch when I explained my situation. You need to file a police report, then submit an identity theft affidavit to the FTC, and you should freeze your credit if you haven't already. I've done half of that, I muttered. Every time I take a step, something else pops up. She handed me a packet of papers. That's the goal. Keep you busy, keep you underwater. People who know how to bend systems do it slow. Death by 1,000 legal paper cuts. I printed everything at the library, dispute letters, FTC forms, state-level fraud alerts. I highlighted dates, labeled scans, started documenting everything. I sent the first formal dispute to 2 credit bureaus, and not even 24 hours later my phone buzzed with an alert. A new hard inquiry, a small one, some obscure bank, but it was there, a fresh wound. I hadn't authorized anything. Someone was still in my file. Not to steal, just to keep me stuck in the mud. As long as my credit report stayed active, stayed messy, I couldn't move. Couldn't rebuild. It wasn't theft anymore, it was war. That was when I started noticing the car. A silver Chevy Tahoe. It showed up near the commuter lot on Thursday, then again near the shelter Saturday morning. Far enough away not to be obvious, but it idled longer than usual. Parked at weird angles, lights off when it should have been day. The third time I saw it, I mentioned it to Eli. He looked sideways at me. You make someone mad. Apparently. You got the look of a man someone's trying to break slow. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Just handed me a burner phone he'd picked up from some outreach van and said, "Keep this off except when you need it, and don't park in the same zip code twice." A blizzard was coming the next night. I parked near a Lutheran church that kept their hall open for snow emergencies. Inside, Pastor Jalen Brooks offered coffee and thermal blankets without questions. I hadn't stepped into a church in years, but the warmth was enough to make me cry quietly into my sleeve. A young volunteer passed out, donated coats, and chatted with another guest. "Remember that warehouse mess from years ago," she said. "That fraud ring down by the river, what was it called?" I froze. She went on. "Something about shell companies, old permits. The guy who disappeared, what was his name?" The conversation drifted elsewhere, but one phrase stuck. The River Warehouse. I knew the place. My uncle used to work there when I was a kid. It rang a bell I didn't even know was still wired. Later that week, I noticed something else. My folder of documents, normally wedged under the back seat, had been moved. One page was missing a photocopy of my birth certificate with notes I'd scribbled in red ink about account overlaps. It was gone for 2 days. Then it reappeared. Folded neatly, placed in my bag, but folded the wrong way, something I never did. Someone had been in my car. I started sleeping with the keys in my palm again. The final push came as a call. Blocked number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. A voice, distorted male, said calmly, "Stop digging, Riven, or you'll lose what little you have left." Click. No name. No demand. Just a message. A threat disguised as advice. It wasn't about money anymore. This had teeth. The fraud. The silence from my mother. The car I kept seeing. And now this someone had flipped a switch. And whatever started in 1998 was finally coming for me. I didn't sleep that night, because I knew I was either going to collapse or finally set everything on fire. It was 2 degrees outside. I parked on the edge of an abandoned lot in Frogtown near a streetlight that flickered every few seconds. I had double-checked the locks, tucked my phone beneath my jacket battery saver on, and pulled the blanket over my head to block the light. But sleep wouldn't come. The threat still echoed in my head. You'll lose what little you have left. At 3:12 a.m., a sharp knock rattled my driver's side window. I jerked up, heart pounding. A flashlight cut through the glass. A voice barked, "Driver's license, please." Officer Declan Pierce was tall, late 50s, with a patrolman's permanent frown. His hand hovered near his belt as I rolled down the window just a few inches and passed my ID through the gap. "You're parked in a restricted lot," he said. I just needed a few hours." "I'll move." "Sit tight," he said. I watched him walk back to the cruiser. I waited and waited. Then I saw him freeze as he stared at the computer screen inside his car. He didn't get out right away. When he did, his posture had changed. He approached slower, one hand near his holster, the other holding his radio. "Mr. Calloway," he said cautiously, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle and sit on the curb." "What's this about?" I asked, already climbing out. He didn't answer until I was seated, hands on my knees, breath fogging in the air. He spoke into his radio, first code numbers I didn't catch. "Then we've got a flag on the subject. Federal marker, year 1998. Homeland Security request immediate contact if seen." My mouth went dry. "Wait." "What, sit still, sir," he said. "We're waiting on a response." I was a kid in 1998. He looked at me for the first time with something like curiosity. "That's not something I can answer." I was shivering now, not just from cold. Pierce paced for a moment, then sat in his cruiser. Lights stayed off. 10 minutes passed. Then I heard the low growl of another engine. A black SUV pulled into the lot. No lights, no sirens, just silence. It parked 20 feet from us. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Trim black jacket. Government badge clipped to her belt. Calm, composed. Pierce straightened like he was in a courtroom. She walked over to me, voice steady. "Mr. Calloway." "Yes, I'm Special Agent Naomi Hart. Homeland Security Investigations." She said my full name. "Then I need to confirm a few details. Your mother's name is Marge Calloway." I nodded slowly. Your maternal uncle, would his name happen to be Everett Gideon? That name hadn't crossed my lips in decades. It felt like hearing a ghost speak through someone else's mouth. I nodded again, the air leaving my lungs. We need to talk, she said. She motioned toward the SUV. I looked at Pierce. He gave a short nod. I got into the back seat of a federal vehicle, hands numb, heart slamming against my ribs. I wasn't a man with bad credit anymore. I was a man who had been watched since 1998. And I had just stepped into the center of something much, much bigger than I'd ever imagined. Naomi confirmed the flag on my record wasn't a warrant, it was a protective alert set in 1998 by someone involved in a federal investigation. That someone was my uncle Garrett Voss. She showed me a photo, Garrett in uniform, a defense contractor tied to intelligence work. Next came the official report he died in a car explosion labeled an accident back then, now reclassified as deliberate. Then Naomi pulled up a blurry surveillance photo from 1998. My mother Marge speaking with a man whose face was mostly obscured. I denied it, but the outline of her was unmistakable. Marge, Naomi said, worked a clerical job near a data routing hub. Garrett had flagged me before his death, marked me as someone to be alerted about if certain risk triggers occurred. Housing loss, financial collapse, isolation. All those had just happened. I was driven to HSI's field office. Inside, cold lighting, blank walls, and a folder stamped, classified interview, Marjorie Calloway, 1998. The transcript had her voice admitting she moved a file. She didn't know they'd kill Garrett. Naomi listed the pattern: my job, housing, and credit destroyed systematically. The setup wasn't just financial abuse, it was control. She showed me a recent photo of Sloan meeting a man who looked like the one beside my mother in 1998. Cross-referenced with Trent's records, there were recurring payments and meetings. Naomi believed Trent wasn't just greedy. He was acting under someone else's orders. She laid out a choice: stay silent and risk the destruction of evidence, or come with them now to confront my family legally with protection. I agreed. That night we returned to Edina. Naomi knocked. My mother answered and froze when she saw the federal badge. I didn't say anything. I just stepped inside. Naomi questioned her, calmly asking about Garrett and the 1998 investigation. Marge deflected until I mentioned the explosion. Her face changed. I didn't know they'd kill him, she whispered. That was her confession. Sloan and Trent came downstairs. Sloan snapped at me, calling me unstable. Trent asked for a lawyer. Naomi presented the photos: Sloan meeting Silas Rook. Their expressions shifted. You weren't supposed to matter, Sloan muttered. They said you'd disappear. Trent tried to intimidate us. Naomi shut him down fast. Obstruction of a federal investigation, she said. Agents cuffed him. Then came the final step. Naomi took me to the old riverfront warehouse. She believed Garrett left something behind. I tried to recall flashes of fire, shouting, hiding. I walked to a scorched corner. Beneath rubble, a small steel box. Inside, a drive, handwritten ledgers, and Garrett's ID. The forensic team confirmed the contents tied Silas Rook to a broader operation. Arrests were made, charges filed. Sloan faced prosecution for fraud. My mother was taken in for further questioning. I didn't fight it. Back at the field office, Naomi handed me documents to clear my debts and restore my record. Later, I moved into a small apartment. My own key. My own name. Marge asked to see me once more. We met with supervision. She said, "Come home." I said that was never a home. I walked away. I wasn't a failure. I was silent to protect a secret. But I spoke, and that made me free. For most of my life, I believed I was the problem. That somehow I had failed. Failed as a son. Failed as a man. Failed to be anything worth holding on to. Those words my mother threw at me. I always knew you'd fail. They didn't just cut. They rooted themselves in me, grew like weeds around my confidence, choking the air out of every dream I tried to build. I let them shape me. I let their narrative become my truth. But here's what I've learned through every sleepless night, every locked bathroom where I washed my face in gas station sinks, every whispered conversation in public libraries. And every time I sat behind a steering wheel in the cold, wondering if I mattered anymore. Sometimes it's not you who's broken. It's the world they built around you. They told me I was nothing because it was convenient. Because if I stayed small, I couldn't dig. If I stayed lost, I couldn't remember. If I stayed quiet, I couldn't expose the things they buried. But the moment I stopped asking why they hurt me and started asking what they were hiding, everything changed. And that's why I'm still here. That's why I'm telling this story. I didn't share this because I want pity. I shared this because someone out there has been lied to about who they are. Someone out there is being told they're worthless by people too afraid of being exposed. And maybe, just maybe, if you're hearing this and it hits something inside you, you're not alone. You never were. If any part of this story made you stop and feel something, I hope you'll stay. I hope you'll hit that subscribe button not just to support me, but to remind yourself that voices like ours matter, that survival isn't shameful, that healing deserves to be seen. Every subscriber, every comment, every share, those aren't just numbers. They're proof that we exist beyond the shadows they tried to bury us in. So please drop a comment, say hi, tell me where you're watching from, or tell me what part of the story hit you hardest, because knowing someone's out there listening, that changes everything. I'm Riven Calloway. I was betrayed, erased, and almost forgotten. But now I'm here, and I'm not done speaking. Thank you for being here with me. Let's keep going together. When the noise finally died down, what stayed with me wasn't the paperwork, the badges, or the courtroom language. It was the quiet realization that a person can be pushed to the edge and still not be the one at fault. Sometimes the cruelest part isn't losing a home or a job. It's losing the version of yourself that believed you deserved better. And maybe that's what we take from this. Chung Ta don't always get to choose what breaks us, but we do get to choose what we build with what's left. A little more gentleness, a little more truth, a little more room for people who are still trying to stand. If you've been listening and something in this story felt familiar, I hope you know you're not alone. And if you'd like, you can leave a few lines in the comments, just hi, or where you're listening from, or the part that hit you the hardest. I read more than you think, and sometimes a small message can make a heavy day feel lighter. And if you want to stay close to stories like this, stories where people don't get reduced to a headline, where we try to understand before we judge, then I'd love for you to subscribe. Not as a click, but as a quiet way of joining a community that listens and shares. Thank you for sitting with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.